Hey everyone, it's Jennifer McGuire. A couple weeks ago I shared a video where I did a technique that I called Distress Ink Bleed. It's a terrible name, but it's a really cool technique. Well, today I have a variation on that technique for a very simple one-layer card with these fun color of little droplets of color in the background. I used some fun products from Neat and Tangled. I like their images because they're great for techniques because they're nice and clean lined. So I'm going to show you how to do this technique. Also, I'm going to show how to make a matching envelope. Lots of little tips and tricks along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. I have this stamp set from Neat and Tangled. It's got some great sentiments in it and also some simple images that are good for this technique. I also have some Tim Holtz watercolor paper here. It's my favorite, but you can use any watercolor paper. And I'm using some painter's tape to temporarily adhere it to a piece of scrap chipboard. This will keep it nice and flat while we're working on it and also allow us to pick it up and move it around to get the color moving, which you'll see why in a little bit that I want to do that. Now I'm going to use this greeting that says "You are awesome." Now I know I want it towards the bottom third of the card, but I'm not sure how far left or right, so I'm just going to temporarily tape this as like a holding place of where my greeting will go later on. Now I've picked 5 colors of distress ink that I'm going to use today. I'm using Mowed Lawn, Picked Raspberry, Seedless Preserves, Peacock Feathers, and Ripe Persimmon. Now distress inks is pretty much a must for this technique because they react with water. I love distress inks for techniques and I can't recommend them enough. From the same stamp set, I've picked a simple outline heart that I'm going to use for this technique, and I also have a cup of water and a brush on hand so that we can do this technique right away. So now I'm just going to start stamping these hearts wherever I want. It really doesn't make any difference where you place them. I do think it's good to have a few overlapping so that the colors blend together when the water comes in play. Now I do try to do this pretty quick because I think if you don't let this ink completely dry for a long time, then the reaction with the water is a little bit better, but it really doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about moving too fast, but that's why I have my water ready so I can do it right away. So now I've stamped lots of hearts on here. Remember, a simple image is best for this because it doesn't get too messy. And I've got a few overlapping here. Now it's time to add the water to it. Now in the video I showed you before, I misted water, so it kind of did like these little veins of color coming out. But in today's video, I'm going to do water droplets instead. And I really love the look of this. It's a fun watercolor look. So this is really nothing fancy. I'm just taking a brush of water and flicking it onto my surface. Now you'll see that it doesn't do much at first. The distress ink doesn't react right away to the water. It's a slow process. But I'm just going to keep on flicking water until I see lots of little droplets on my stamped images. Don't worry about the water that gets on the white. It's okay, it'll dry nicely because this is watercolor paper. Now this is where my control freak comes into play here. I like to go back with my water brush and put little dots in certain places where I want to see some droplets. So I just go back and add, and I just pretend these were little droplets that I flicked on, but they really are ones that I placed there. And I make sure all the hearts have little dots. Now you'll see that the water is starting to react with the distress ink. Distress inks react when they come in contact with water and they spread and turn into like a watercolor, and that's why this works well. If you have distress markers, you could put the marker on the stamp and stamp that and do the same technique if you want to. You'll see that the color is starting to bleed a little bit, but don't worry, it'll get more intense as we give this a little more time and also when we add the heat to it. So once I'm happy with all the little dots of water on here, I'm just going to go ahead and heat it some. This allows me to hurry the process because I'm impatient, but it also allows the color to become a little more intense and also lets me see if there's areas where I still want a little more watercolor to happen. So I can go back and add some more colors. The reason I have it on this chipboard is this is keeping it nice and flat and not forcing any of our water droplets to kind of pour off the side. And I can also pick it up and move it around really easily. So now we have these water droplets really starting to look nice. The thing with distress inks is most distress ink techniques look terrible as you're doing it. But once they dry, they turn out really pretty. And I think when these droplets dry, they're just beautiful. I don't know, I just love the look of watercolor and I know it's really popular right now. So this is a really quick and easy technique that you can do with any simple stamp image. So now if there are any droplets that aren't drying or they're a little too intense, you can just stick a paper towel or baby wipe into it and it'll absorb the extra color and you can remove it very quickly. And that just helps in making this dry a little bit faster. Now we have the clean and simple one-layer card class going on over at Online Card Classes right now. So I was inspired by that to create a completely flat card. So I wanted to have a metal strip of tape down the side, but I wanted to keep it one layer. So I'm going to show you a trick to create a faux metal tape. That's that strip going down the right side of my card, and it matches the greeting that we're going to do. This is really easy to do, and I think it's a great way to kind of add something fun to a card that you really want to keep pretty simple. So I have my card here, it's completely dry. I'm just going to take some post-it tape and cover up the edge here, just mask it off. You could use scrap paper for this if you want to. Taking Versamark ink here, and I'm just kind of pulling it along that edge so I can completely cover that edge with the clear sticky ink. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my handy dandy little container here and put on some of my favorite embossing powder, the liquid platinum from Ranger. Any kind of silver would be fun here. I just like this one because it's a warm silver and kind of has a champagne look to it. That's just beautiful and goes with any style of card. Tap off the extra and you can pull off your tape. And then I'm just going to heat that up, and you can see how you quickly get the look of a metal tape along the edge of your card, but it's completely flat. And I love the look of it. And I like that it's a little more toned down than a shiny metal tape. So now it's time to stamp that greeting that we held a place for. So I'm going to stamp with the Versamark ink. Now I can decide where to stamp this, kind of left or right on my card. Add some of that same embossing powder and heat it up. And now we have the trim of our card matching the greeting also. Now this piece started as a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of watercolor paper, but I wanted to turn it into a card without just gluing it on the front of a card base. So here's a little trick that you can do. I have another piece of watercolor paper here, the same size, and I'm going to put a score line about a 1/2 inch from the top. Now, since I'm using the same watercolor paper, this ends up with like a kind of a nice uniform card because the front and the back are the same material. And I'm just going to score this back and forth so it's got a nice little hinge on the top there. Now I'm going to take some glossy accents and put some across the top of this flap, and I'm going to rub it around with my finger. I'm using glossy accents because that's super strong and it'll keep this together nicely. You could also use any kind of strong adhesive, or you can do a sewn stitch across the top too. And because of that hinge, this card will open up nicely, and there we've turned a one-layer piece into a card. I also stamped the message "That is all," which is on the same stamp set, in the inside of the card with Versamark ink, and I'm adding some more of that embossing powder so that the greeting on the inside goes along with the greeting on the outside. Great way to kind of tie it all together. Another fun way to finish off the look of a card is to do a matching envelope. So I have a Hero Arts envelope. I like theirs because they come in fun colors and they also have the fun design on the flap. I'm going to take the same heart and the same greeting, stamp it with Versamark ink, and heat emboss it with the same embossing powder. I found that heat embossed images work great on envelopes. They hold up nicely, and it's a great way to give a really nice finished look that stands out. I always think it's fun to have something stamped on the flap of an envelope. It's just something fun that they see when they go to open up the card. So there we finished our card with the watercolor. We have our image on the inside, and we have the matching envelope, all using some simple stamps and some fun techniques. I hope this inspires you to break out your neat and tangled stamps and try some fun watercolor techniques. Thanks so much for watching.